Hi guys, TheHande here. So last time I ranked the Evil Mutants from the New Adventures of He-Man, and now it's time to rank the Galactic Guardians. The biggest problem for this ranking, however, was really who really qualifies as a Galactic Guardian. And I'm going to spend a lot more time here telling exactly who got excluded and why, because shockingly, there are actually a lot more hero characters on the show than villain characters, which is the reason why I had such difficulty. And also, I wanted to get an equivalent number to the Evil Mutant ranking, so that was another reason why I decided to keep the number of characters very tiny. Basically just 8 ranking slots with 1 double entry for 2 characters that I had difficulty deciding which one I liked better. Alright, but let's start with the characters that obviously are not going to be featured in the ranking, because Skeletor was rejected from the Mutants ranking for not being a mutant. I also thought it would be appropriate for me to not rank He-Man. Also, no, Clawbird is not a Galactic Guardian. And the Primus scientists were also excluded, not because I don't like these characters. Well, okay, most of the time I don't like these characters, but mostly because it would have added another 4 characters into the ranking, and most of them would have been towards the bottom anyway, so I decided not to muddy the waters too much with this one. Alright, but then there are 3 characters who would definitely be classified as Galactic Guardians, but whom I excluded specifically because these characters were so unimportant that trying to come up with any reason why I would want to rank them anywhere except the bottom would have been too much of a chore. In fact, I can give you a nice group shot of all 3 Guardians disqualified from the ranking. This shot from the series intro. Yeah. Visor, Nocturna, and KO. Which I think speaks to a lot about how the New Adventures intro has got to be one of the most misleading intros of any cartoon, because it shows Skeletor looking like this, even though he looked like this for a vast majority of the series. So I think it's pretty obvious why these 3 guys are not on the ranking. Nocturna literally only had dialogue in the very final episode of the series, and the rest of the time he is literally just a background character. Visor at least had dialogue in a couple of episodes, but again, he really is just a bunch of dead weight. And even though KO was chosen for whatever reason to represent Primus in the games towards the series end, he really has no personality and no outstanding characteristics. So again, this is the reason why he's not on the ranking either. Also, Glebe Sebrian and Bimo are not included in the ranking for obvious reasons, but because I made such a show and dance about the exclusions, I felt obligated to point them out anyway. Alright, but those were the disqualifications. Let's now finally get to the ranking. At rank number 8, it's Drizzy, one of the 3 recurring female characters on the show, 4 if you count the sorceress. Now, Drizzy's power is that she can telepathically communicate with animals, and of course, she's Kaz's older sister, which unfortunately kind of means that she was more of a tag-along character than anything else. Her powers did have one highlight moment during the Festival of Lights, because she was able to find out that the rodeo animals were actually robots. And honestly, with a power like that, I think Drizzy could have honestly been the star of a couple of episodes. However, it does seem to me that throughout the series, systematically, Drizzy just got the short end of the stick, as any interesting ways she could have been used in the show just got shut down by other characters being complete idiots. The most egregious example of this is probably the episode Plague on Primus, which of course bottomed out the bottom 10 episodes list. But of course, there's also The Gift, where her powers were completely dismissed by Sebrian, the single worst character on this fucking show. So, it might not be the character's fault, but Drizzy unfortunately is basically nothing but a little bit of eye candy maybe. And I really wish she would have been used much better throughout the series, and because of that, she bottoms out the ranking. But at least Drizzy was a consistent enough of a character throughout the series, albeit she kinda disappears during the second half of the series. But she is still way more interesting than any of the characters I disqualified from the ranking. At number 7, Kaz. Kaz is an annoying brat, and I hate him. Well, sort of hate him. Kaz, I think, is a good example of how not to do child characters on cartoon shows. Yes, it is okay to show kids being bratty, impulsive, and generally pains in the butt, but I get the feeling like the New Adventures production crew just took the opportunity to peg Kaz with every annoying kid trope that they could come up with. Kaz doesn't really even work as an audience proxy because he is genuinely kind of unlikable. Yes, it's kind of commendable that he wants to go to battle with the mutants, but they never really explain just how incredibly dangerous that would be. And because of that, every time I see Kaz, I kind of cringe a little bit because I know we're in for some really painful dialogue coming from him. But Kaz does have one good episode appearance to his name, which is the only reason I'm willing to put him above Drizzy in this ranking. And that, of course, was the episode He Kaz, where Kaz actually got superpowers via a suit, but nevertheless it counts, and actually used it to help other people, and not just to gather glory for himself. Now, He Kaz is not a great episode, but like I said, Kaz really was kind of the most relatable character in that thing, hence his position on the ranking. At number 6, Tuscadar. Tuscadar's power is that he throws guys with his mammoth tusks. He also seems to have a fairly active role, often being the person who engages the mutants head-on, and he seems to have a fairly high ranking amongst the Galactic Guardians, being put in charge of various operations throughout the series. And there are definitely more than a few episodes where he carries his weight in battle, but I can't be the only one who thinks that Tuscadar is really nothing more than a discount snout spout. And frankly, I really think Tuscadar's voice performance is just really bad. I don't know what it is, it just doesn't seem to fit his character very well. And again, he doesn't really have the most interesting personality. However, he was one of the central characters in The Zone of Darkness, which is one of the best episodes of the series, and at least he didn't manage to ruin it or anything. Plus, I kinda liked his little training sequence in the episode You're in the Army Now. So there definitely is a lot to Tuscadar, but he's never really been one of my favorite characters, and honestly, the fact that I just find him ever so slightly less annoying than Kaz is the only reason I'm willing to put him slightly above him in the ranking. At number 5, Artella. Artella is a robot. And that's pretty much what we find out about him for the vast majority of the series. Until towards the very end. In the episode There's Gems in Them Hills, which had a really nice bonding moment between him and BMO. Also, Artella was definitely one of the more competent Galactic Guardians when he was suddenly introduced. And I get the feeling if the show writers had actually used him a little bit better, he would have actually been much higher in the ranking. Artella seems to have an interesting backstory that we were just all denied, mostly because he never got to be the center of attention in a lot of episodes. And the first one that he was in, Skeletor's Revenge, his entire appearance in there is just highlighted by how sudden and abrupt it is. But again, Artella doesn't really have any outstanding character traits here, which is the reason I have to put him on the bottom half of the ranking. Number 4, Segatar. Segatar is a character who was introduced very early on and became a constant support character in various stories. He's some kind of a weird horse-human combination, and let's be honest, his outstanding trait is that he's a big buff boy who does big buff boy things. But he's also apparently a friend to animals, which is kind of interesting. He's also maybe a little bit impulsive and meat-headed, which frankly isn't a great trait, but it makes him at least slightly stand out from the myriad of unmemorable Galactic Guardian characters throughout the series, which alone is enough to secure him a spot in the top 4. But I gotta be honest, Campbell Lane's voice performance for Segatar occasionally was honestly kinda bad. Again, part of the blame really goes to the voice directors on the show who didn't seem to know what they were doing half the time. When Segatar was the actual focus of the action and when his lines actually matched up with what he was doing, I feel this character honestly had the potential to be even better. Hell, he even got his own highlight episode, Running of the Herd. But the big problem here, again, is that every attempt to try to make Segatar interesting kinda ended up a bit lukewarm or half-assed. Particularly, as I mentioned, his rivalry with the character Staghorn. But there's a lot more substance to Segatar than the bottom 3 characters, and his backstory was actually explored somewhat, unlike Artella's, but it would be a stretch for me to put him any higher in the ranking. At number 3, Mara. Now, Mara obviously gets this high for the same reasons as Krita on the Evil Mutants ranking. The simple fact that Mara takes initiative and becomes basically the lead character for the Might Gleanon conflict episodes. Initially only starting out as a diplomat, she eventually becomes the queen of the Mites, and leads their armies to victories against Krita and the Gleanons. This makes her really one of the few Galactic Guardian characters who had a number of highlight episodes focusing on them, and most of which were actually pretty good. Note here that I said most of them, During the first half of the series, Mara, unfortunately, is a bit of dead weight, and at times, honestly, just as dumb as some of the other characters on the show. Now, I appreciate the show writers didn't just turn her into the token girl of the show, but at the same time, it is obvious that throughout the first half of the series, they kind of struggled to what to do with her, because unlike Drissy, she didn't even have her own special powers or anything like that. However, during the Mike Leanon story arc, she definitely shows her competence way more on the battlefield, and this is what makes her way more interesting than a lot of the other Galactic Guardians. But then she also kind of disappears when the Mike Leanon story arc is briefly put on hold during the latter half of the series. And at number 2, it's a double entry. Hydran and Flipshot. I've made no secret that these two are pretty much my favorite Galactic Guardian characters, and the reason for that is that, well, these guys have been part of the series the longest. They are the main characters of the very first episode, more or less, and continue to assist He-Man in various ways all throughout the series. Also, fun fact, while I don't typically get too excited about He-Man toy stuff, I did in fact have a Captain Hydran action figure as a kid. That all being said, Hydran and Flipshot are maybe not the best heroic characters on the show, and actually that is what makes them kind of interesting. Hydran is at least competent, but he's also a bit full of himself, best exemplified in the absolutely hilarious 4 Ways to Sundown. Also, I think he and Mara were going out at the start of the series, but honestly the show never really elaborated on that. Flipshot, on the other hand, is a complete dumbass. Also full of himself, but also a bit of a fuck-up, and because of that, he's sort of unintentionally the comic relief character of the show. I mean, sort of unintentionally, because at times Flipshot actually is competent and decently good at this hero stuff. However, there are way more episodes where Flipshot fucks something up or is just doing something completely ridiculous in the background. But like I said, the back and forth between these guys is really what makes them such awesome characters. The character dynamics on the New Adventures of He-Man were honestly kind of one note for the most part, but Hydran and Flipshot are a pair of characters who are not only happy to make fun of each other, but they also always come through for each other whenever there's trouble. Now, all that said, Hydran could be a little bit grating with his domineering personality, and Flipshot's idiocy could reach almost cringeworthy levels in some of the bad episodes that he was in. But typically, whenever I see these guys on screen, I'm usually really happy. And that's why they wound up almost at the very top of the ranking, and I even briefly did think about putting them as a joint number 1 entry. So, who could possibly top all of these guys? At number 1, Spinwit. Yeah, I need to give Spinwit the recognition he deserves as the most improved character throughout the show. Because I'm gonna be honest, when Spinwit was first introduced all the way back in Festival of Lights, he didn't have any powers or dialogue. Over the course of the next couple of episodes where he was in, he really came off as just kind of a wimp, like a discount Flipshot. But then, halfway through the series, Spinwit started using his powers and being a general badass, and especially towards the end of the series, it was shown that Spinwit was actually very resourceful, and had slowly become one of the most important Galactic Guardians in my opinion. Okay, so there are 1 or 2 really bad episodes with Spinwit, Tornadoes of Zill in particular. But I'm willing to kind of forgive those because it shows that for some reason, the series writers really honed in on Spinwit as the character who deserved all of this development, which is kind of bizarre because he was never a super important character at the very start or anything like that. The main thing I like about Spinwit is that he has a full-fledged personality, which is way more than I can say for a lot of the characters on the show. And even when he is annoying, I can at least appreciate that he's annoying for being who he is. So yeah. That's why Spinwit is my favorite Galactic Guardian. And that's the ranking. Tell me, who is your favorite Galactic Guardian in the comments down below. I'm TheHande, and until next time, I have the power, so can you.